Good morning. My name is Paul Huebner, and I run the middle school ministry.
And my name is Ayala, and I get to lead our high school ministry.
And we're so excited to be here on Student Ministry Sunday. We're excited to be part of a congregation that values their students, but also students that value being part of their church. And we're just so grateful for Alex doing announcements. We're so grateful for our worship team, for Tim back there and the sound team over there. And then we have Ava and Ivy doing the hosting for the online service. We have students serving all over the place this week.
It's awesome. Can you guys give them a round of applause? They were amazing, weren't they?
Well, today we're here to talk about that we have a new mission that's before us, the same mission that's before us, but a new generation. And how do we take what we know, take the life that we've experienced, the relationship with God that we have, and give that to the next generation? And for us, I think there's really two things that can be done for this next generation. And what we've done is, since we're part of a rich history here at Blackrock of student ministry, we're not the first people to do student ministry here, we're not the last ones to do it. We've looked back at some of the people, some of the alum that we've had through student ministry, and we've asked them, hey, for you guys, when you guys were in student ministry, what ended up causing you to become a passionate and resilient follower of Jesus, even after your time in student ministry? So we have three people that we've asked. The first one is Eric Zeldin-Beatty. And Eric has gone through our ministry, so much so that he decided to come back and intern with us for the summer. And now he's off at school under Rob Ginta, pursuing ministry for his career. And so we asked Eric, we said, Eric, what are some things that contributed to you being a passionate, resilient follower of Christ? And the first thing he said it was his parents. And his parents, how they had made an intentionality in their schedule to say, we're going to be part of church. We're going to show up on Wednesday nights for Thrive, on Tuesday nights for Fusion, and we're going to do that and make that a priority for our home. But also, it's him being able to come here and being able to have those conversations with peers, with adult leaders about his faith in a place where he felt that he could be himself and that he could ask those important, deep questions that he had been wrestling with.
The next person we're going to be talking about today is Sarah Purdy. Many of you probably know her or have seen her around. She's on staff here at Blackrock. And Sarah grew up coming to Blackrock, went through our student ministry, and while talking with her, she really focused on the fact that her parents played such a pivotal role in her discipleship. Whether it was making it a priority to be a part of whatever was happening here on weeknights, whether it was Pioneer Girls or our student ministry, it was a priority for them to be here. But what I loved was that she even said it wasn't just about church attendance. That wasn't the main focus of what my parents were trying to teach me. What they were really trying to teach me was that my identity was found in Christ. And while reflecting more on her parents' role in discipleship, she talked about her dad, Craig Samuelson, and said this: "My dad's desk illustrates this well. His desk is often covered with piles of paper, blueprints, tools, and more. But every time I see it, I see his open, well-worn Bible, filled with handwritten notes and underlined verses, sitting on top of everything else. Despite all the messes and busyness of life, my parents consistently demonstrated that God is above it all. He comes first."
And then next up, we have Carolyn Delao, formerly of the Lubert tribe. And we asked her, say, what has contributed to you being a follower of Christ here today? And Carolyn is so much a part of our student ministry that she actually worked with us on staff for student ministry for a season. She's since moved on to other things, but so much so that even though she's moved on and she's not part of our staff, she's still a small group leader serving with Fusion because she understands the importance of student ministry. And we asked her, hey, Carolyn, what are some things that contributed to you having a robust faith here today? And the first thing would be, she said, her parents, and just modeling what it looked like to be in the home and to live as a Christian family. So much so that I know for Passover, they do a Seder that they invite people into their home to do, to walk through what does Passover look like from a biblical perspective. And she says in those routines, whether it's family dinners, different things at home, that her home had a model of what it looked like to be a follower of Christ. But also here, to be part of Fusion, and that she was able to come to Fusion and be able to have that community, that she was able to wrestle with different things, whether it's her life or theology, her faith, that she could come and she can have a place to do that. And so I think there's a common theme throughout these three stories. And the first being that each of these students grew up in a home that valued a relationship and modeled that relationship with God.
Yeah.
Secondly, that they would be part of a community here at BlackRock where throughout middle school and throughout high school, they were able to have their peers in a Christian community, but also to have mentors, adult small group leaders that poured into them and that showed them the way to follow Christ. And I think between those two things, that's really what we found to be the recipe for creating resilient and passionate followers of Christ. And what we're going to do today is I'm going to be in Deuteronomy, and Andres is going to be in 1 Thessalonians, but we're going to map out biblically what does that have to say about those two different concepts, about being a model in the home, but also being a model here at church. Yeah. So I'm going to start us off here in Deuteronomy. We're going to be reading what is known as the Shema. So it's in Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9, which says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength. These commandments I give to you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates." So as I said, this passage is known as the Shema. After that first word, that word listen in Hebrew is Shema. And that doesn't mean just that half-hearted listening. So like when I go to the gym or when I'm cooking, sometimes I'll listen to an audiobook. And as I find that I mess up a rep or I burn the dish, I'm like, oh no, I'm scrambling. And then I have to hit rewind because, I definitely wasn't listening to what was being said there. It's not that half-hearted type of listening, but it's a wholehearted, intentional listening. It's a, listen up, hey Israel, this is important. And the reason why we're listening up is so we can hear and obey. That there's a result that comes out of that. It's a result of obedience to what the Lord has got to say. And that result is it's focusing on the Lord, and it's focusing on remembrance of who the Lord is. In the end of verse 4, there's a simultaneous, I think, an intentionally two-part reminder of who God is, that God is one, which communicates the idea that God is whole in himself, he needs nothing else, but that also God is one, there are no other gods before him, no one holds a candle to who God is. Yeah. It highlights that idea that God is whole and that God is sovereign, God is above everything else. That reminder, hey Israel, remember the Lord your God that you serve. But it's not just to remember the Lord, there's a call to action, and that action is to love the Lord. I think it's interesting, the verse describes God's wholeness and God's unity, but then it calls for us in our wholeness, in our unity, to address back to the Lord. So it talks about loving the Lord your God in three different parts of the self. And in Hebrew understanding, this would have been the three different parts that compose yourself. So it talks about the heart, it talks about the soul, and it talks about our strength. So the heart in Hebrew understanding is this idea of lev, and it's an idea of the mind, of the intellect. It's not the feeling type that we associate with the heart today, but it's your mind. What are you thinking about? What do you focus on? What do you study? And then it focuses on the soul. What is your will? What is that intangible part of you that makes decisions, that decides to do this or that? And then finally, your strength, your physical body. What is your physical body doing to love the Lord your God? Let's dig into those a little bit. So, do we love God with our minds? Do we study the Word of God? Do we have that desire to learn more about who God is? Do we love God with our souls, with our will? Experts say that we make up to around 35,000 decisions each day, which is crazy. Some of those are more important than others, but in all those decisions, you make the choice. Your will decides to do one or the other. And when you're making those choices, is your will the only will that's in consideration? Or are you considering what does God will for me as I make these decisions throughout my day? And finally, your strength, your body. Are you doing things with your body that glorifies the Lord? Are you taking care of the temple of the Holy Spirit? Are you honoring God in the way that you use your body? And I think that an important point here is even the structure of the Shema. It focuses first on us as individuals. before it even talks about the next generation. And I think that's a key and critical, intentional way that this is designed. That before we start thinking about the next generation, the Lord's commandments must be on our hearts first. Before we start thinking about the next generation, God's commandments must be on our hearts before we even start to think about that. I was meeting with a bunch of youth pastors for a retreat a few months ago, and one of them I got talking to, and he said that he's just starting out at a small church. And that caught my ear because before I was here, I was in a small church context, church planning context, and I said, oh, let's talk. And as we chatted, eventually he came to the point, he said, hey, you sound like you've done this for a little bit. Do you have any advice for me? And I thought through all the different things I could tell him about programming or about different structures for teaching. But I said, you know what? What's more important is you need to ask yourself, is what you have, the walk you have, worth replicating?
Yeah.
Because that's what's going to be replicated in the lives of these students. And is your current ministry, where you're at right now, worth replicating? Because if you want to make it big and you want to have a huge youth ministry, but it's for something that isn't glorifying to God, and it's just to puff up your own ego, then there's no point in it. And I think that the same applies here today to us. That before we start thinking about the next generation, we need to take a look at ourselves. Do we love the Lord our God with all our heart, with all of our soul, and with all of our strength? Yeah. Because we need to pass something on to the generation, and it should be something that's good. It should be something that is intentional. It should be something that we say, yes, I understand this because I live it out in my own life, and I want to see you live it out in your life as well as we create disciples. Yeah. I think next, in verse 7, God describes his commandments and how we need to share them with our children. I think the challenge here is we can often describe God in the circumstances of life. That we can say, all right, this is how I think that God works in one circumstance. But God is a whole God, as we saw before. God is one. God is whole. God is not just one favorite thing we like about him. And I think sometimes in talking with our kids, we can create these caricatures of who God is. So for example, maybe God is like a fire extinguisher, that you reach in there, you grab it, you use it to put out the fires in your life, and you put it back in its case and hope you don't have to use it again for a while. Yeah. Maybe God is the moral police, and he's always looking out on the cameras to look to see what's happening, and oh, he caught you doing something, so now he's going to hit you with a big dose of karma so that you get punished for what you did. Or maybe we think of God as God is somebody who sits up on his throne, and he's just waiting for us to mess up so that he can say, oh, no, that's not how you do it. This is how you do it instead. Or is God a vending machine? Do we put in the good deeds that we do, and then God rewards us with everything that we want? And I think, to an extent, each of those caricatures has a truth in it, but if it's the only thing that we're describing to our children about who God is, based on our favorite topic, we're not giving them a whole picture of who God is. But how do I describe all of who God is? Because God's infinite. That seems like a very daunting task. Well, I think the way that Moses describes this in the Shema is he gives us parameters for when to do that. So he says that we need to do that when we go out and when we stay in, and when we rise up in the morning and we go to sleep at night. There are no time parameters. There's no space parameters, because it's not you only do that at church. You do that when you're at home, when you're out. There's no time parameters. It's not, 7 to 8 o'clock, that's the time we just talk about God, and the rest of it, I don't want to hear about it. No, it's when you rise up in the morning, when you go to bed at night. There's no space, there's no time parameters on it. Because you're sharing your kids your life. You're sharing your kids the belief and the relationship that you have with God. And it should be something that's intentional, and not just something that you pick one piece of who God is or one sliver of time to show them who God is. Lastly, this passage talks about physical ways to remember the Lord. And while I don't think it needs to be taken literally, like I don't have a piece of scripture strapped to my forehead right now, I do have a mezuzah at home. That's what it's talking about when it says, keep the word on your doorposts for when you go out. And in my mezuzah at home, there is a copy of the Shema, these verses that we just read. And to me, when I look out the door and my mind is going a million miles an hour and I'm thinking, I got to do this. I forgot my coffee. Let me go back in the kitchen and grab it. I can look at it and say, the Lord is my God. The Lord is one. I'm supposed to love the Lord my God with all my heart, soul, and strength. And it serves as a tangible reminder to me. So my question for us is, what are those tangible reminders that we put throughout our day and our schedules for the children that God has entrusted us in our home? So maybe for some families, that's a nighttime prayer that you do together. Maybe it's a devotional you do in the morning before everybody starts off on the schedule for the day. Or maybe it's you pray over the meal you have and you share, hey, what is one way that God has showed up in my life today? For you get to set that tone, and you get to set that boundary marker, that reminder of who the Lord your God is. And that's up for you to do. But I think there needs to be an intentionality in it, because if you don't, it's going to slip through the cracks. You're going to look up and you're going to say, where have the past 10 years gone? I haven't remembered the Lord my God. And that's important, I think, to be able to pass onto our kids. But I think this is great, and I think this is good for those of us who are in a home where we're maybe an uncle or an aunt or a grandparent or a parent, somebody that can instill this into our family. But sometimes we found in student ministry that we have families that don't value the Lord our God. And our student comes here without that family connection. And it begs the question, what do we do in that context? What do we do when we have students that show up in our midst here at BlackRock and they don't have any family connection to God? Who stands up to fill in that gap?
That question has plagued my mind over the past 2 years as I've been doing my position, been working with high school students, because our student ministry is something that's really fun. Our students enjoy coming to it. They love coming so much so that they invite their friends. They want their friends to come and enjoy what they get to experience on a Tuesday or on Wednesday night. And what happens during that time is the gospel is presented. A student decides, hey, I want to give my life to Jesus, but there's no backing. There's no one at home who's teaching them what it looks like to read their Bible. There's no one at home that teaches them what it looks like to worship, how to pray. So what do we do with that? What do we do with that? Luckily, as we've been talking to our alumni, we were talking to Chris Delao, who's actually Carolyn Delao's husband, and Chris has gone through our ministry, and Chris talked about the fact that his parents really didn't play a role at all in his discipleship. They really just said, hey, just kind of do whatever you want, pick whatever you want, we'll support you, but that's really up to you. And what Chris realized was that a lot of his discipleship happened here at BlackRock Church. So Chris said, the BlackRock community ultimately played the biggest role in my discipleship in following Jesus. It was my summer adventure counselor, Rob Ginta, who cared enough to text me, encourage me, and help get me connected at BlackRock Student Ministry. It took a bold move of a stranger, Ryan Palazzini, to introduce himself to me and pretty much become my first friend at Fusion. The story continues with people like my adult leaders reaching out to me when I was an outsider, but my path was also very dependent on my willingness to say yes and seek out those opportunities. BlackRock, I believe that we are not only called to make disciples of our own children, but I really believe that God is calling us into something greater as a church family to disciple and come alongside the next generation. But here's the thing. High schoolers are really scary. Middle schoolers are amazing. But it's threatening. How do we do that? How do we come alongside high school and middle school students and teach them more about who Jesus is? Lucky for us, I believe that Paul lays that out for us in his letter to the Thessalonian church. So we're going to be reading from 1 Thessalonians today. Paul writes, "For the appeal we make does not spring from error or impure motives, nor are we trying to trick you. On the contrary, we are speaking as those approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel. We are not trying to please people, but God who tests our hearts. You know we never use flattery, nor did we put on a mask to cover up greed. God is our witness. We were not looking for praise from people, not from you or anyone else, even though as apostles of Christ, we could have asserted our authority. Instead, we were like young children among you. Just as a nursing mother cares for her children, so we cared for you. Because we loved you so much, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well." Adults sitting in this room, I believe that there are some beautiful wisdom nuggets in this passage. Because really, what Paul is telling us is that it is our call to share our lives with the next generation. But here's the thing. I think so often we fall into these natural positions of how we interact with the next generation. And I'm going to walk through those now. I think the first way that we can kind of have a natural position towards our next generation is oftentimes we just kind of fake caring about them. We care, we listen, we say we care about their mental health, we say we care about their lives, but when they're talking the whole time, all you're thinking about is, I can't wait to tell them what I think. I can't wait to give them my advice. Sometimes I listen to high schoolers and I go, dude, if only you knew that in 10 years you won't be thinking about that. Let me tell you why. But here's the thing. That breakup for a high schooler is the biggest thing going on in their life at that moment. We can look back and go, not that big a deal. But to them, it is so important. This generation is looking for people to come alongside them and listen, not just to share their agenda. I think the next way that we can kind of have this a natural position or a natural way of interacting with our generation, or next generation, is by asserting our authority. You see, church, I believe that you and I were actually given authority to call up the next generation, to call them into the identity that Christ has given them. That is our job. But we should not do that by asserting our own dominance towards them, by letting them know, well, this is how it needs to be, and that's it. I don't want to hear it. Right? So often, I have conversations with high schoolers, and that's what it sounds like the older generation does. Because you care, you don't want to see them make the same mistakes. So you shove what you believe onto them. Just take it. I really want you to understand this. I really want you to grasp this. Just do it. But Paul reminds the church, that's not what the apostles did. That's not what I did. We didn't assert our dominance. Instead, we were like young children among you. We listened. We enjoyed one another. We hung out with each other. And that was where we saw the greatest share of life together. And then much like what Chris experienced, we can oftentimes have a very neutral stance towards the next generation. They'll figure it out. Someone else will do it. I don't have to care for them. You know what? We have some amazing youth guys. Andres and Paul, you guys, you do a great job. Take care of our kids. You have adult leaders. They can disciple them. That's not our job as a church, but it is. Right? When we read verses 7 and 8, Paul reminds the church that it is their job. It's their job to come alongside. It's our job to come alongside. He says, just as a nursing mother cares for her children, so we cared for you. Because we loved you so much, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives. Worship team, you guys can come up. Church, it is our called position to come alongside this next generation. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Because here's the thing. I get the opportunity to say that I am part of Gen Z. I'm on the older end. I'm on the cusp of millennial and Gen Z. I go back and forth on where I really want to stay. Depends how people are talking about each generation. But I know that Gen Z is waiting for a generation to step up and help lead us. They're waiting for spiritual mothers and fathers to come alongside us to say, how can we walk with you? Paul says, just as a nursing mother cares for her child, so we cared for you. Church, that's a call to us to care for our teens just like a nursing mother would her child. There are some of you who are sitting in this room who might have kids and teenagers, and I think that that's awesome. You guys should be discipling your kids, but also disciple the kids who come into your house, the friends that come over who get to experience your relationship with the Lord, your family's relationship with the Lord. That's the call. For those of you who are sitting in this room who might not have kids, I don't. I'm still called to walk alongside our teens, to help them understand what it looks like to wholeheartedly follow Jesus. Because what I love about Gen Z is they can smell fake from a mile away. They know when you're being fake with them. They know when you have an agenda. What they're really looking for is, I want to see people who live this out. You follow Jesus, I want to see you live this out. Because what we're seeing in the world is that the evangelical church isn't. Our church this year decided to step in and do a series called Wholehearted. Why? Because we want to see our church wholeheartedly follow Jesus. Because there is a generation who is waiting to see adults wholeheartedly follow Jesus with all that they have, with all that they are. Just like Paul said, so that they can imitate and model after you. We're going to spend some time in worship in just a few minutes. And during that worship time, I want you to begin to ask the Lord some questions. If you're a parent sitting in this room, I want to challenge you to ask the Lord, what is one way that I can more actively disciple my kids? What's a way that I can more actively show them that I follow Jesus, that my whole life is surrendered to him? Now, if you're an adult in this room and maybe you don't have kids or your kids are out of the house, maybe you have nieces and nephews. Maybe you have grandkids. I want you to ask the Lord, how can I more actively engage with the next generation, Lord? How can I show them that I love Jesus? Not just by sharing the gospel, but by sharing my life. And I can't forget my students in the room. Students, you have young kids who are coming up behind you. They're watching you. They're waiting to see how does this person follow Jesus? Is it possible to follow Jesus in high school? I'm going to watch the high school students and see how they do it. High schoolers are watching college students to see how they do it. Students, how can you actively be a part of being a spiritual brother or sister to those who are younger than you?
Thank you for watching Blackrock Church's Sunday service. We're so glad you found us, and we hope this message made you feel more connected to God. In talking about connection, we find that it's super important for people to be connected to others and to community in order to grow in their faith. So if you're in the area, we invite you to join us to worship in a service. You can find out about our times and locations right here on this webpage. We'd also love to help you connect in a group and find people who can walk alongside you as you continue deepening your understanding and faith. And after you get to know us, you might even like to use your gifts to serve on a team. We believe God gave each of us unique gifts that we can use to serve those around us. One body with many different parts. If you're not able to be here in person, don't worry. We have a great online community and many ways for you to join in virtually and talk to us throughout the week. You can also stay in touch on our website, YouTube channel, Facebook, and Instagram. By visiting our website, you can also easily give your offering one time as an online gift or a reoccurring gift. Just click Give at the top. The Bible tells us that tithing is an important part of our relationship with Jesus, and we want to continue to trust God with our lives and our finances. Well, we are so glad you made the choice to get to know us and view one of our services. We hope that you join us next week. Thanks so much for watching.